Welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. I'm joined today for a very special program with Sean Dotson. Sean Dotson has spent nearly 3 decades building, scaling, fixing companies in industrial automation, and has now moved on and is here today to talk to us um, about kind of his venture capital firm and what Suncoast Venture Studios, and we're going to get into the specifics about what they do and how they are helping in creating new companies and then helping them grow. So, Sean, thanks so much for
Mhm.
joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So, why don't you start out, give us your a little personal background, and tell us more about Suncoast.
Sure. I'm a Florida native. Been pretty much growing up my entire life here in Florida. Mechanical engineer by education. Got into some robotics back in college. Our very small robot lab back in the day. Um, Exited after college. Went and did some packaging machinery design, automation machinery design. Worked for a couple companies for about 6, 7, 8 years or so. Then started R&D Automation along with two partners, two of my top engineers at the previous company. Grew it over the next 18 to 20 years into one of the larger in the Southeast. I think we had 70 employees at our maximum. In late 2020, sold the company to private equity firm. Continued on with them for the next year and a half, doing a lot of mergers and acquisition work. So finding other uh, bolt-on companies to try to form a platform, and that's kind of where I got my first taste of the investing side and again mergers, acquisitions, and venture capital and private equity and things like that. And it was something I enjoyed. Left there and then did various consulting and advisory work and turnarounds and things like that. And then through an investor group that I belong to here in Sarasota, I met the guys who were putting together this venture capital studio, Suncoast Venture Studios. They asked me to kind of come on as an advisor and talk with them and help them out a little bit. And after I finished up my last gig, they said, "Oh, you're free 100% now. So why don't dive in 100% into it?" So I'm now the COO of the Sarasota Venture Studio.
It's a great story and a great journey you've been through. And it sounds like you're in a very exciting position right now. We were talking a little bit before the show about how what you're doing and how exciting this is for you. Maybe talk us a little bit about how Suncoast works and get into the whole specifics around the studio versus the incubator and the
Mhm.
accelerator.
Sure. Yeah. There's some subtle differences. A lot of people will use incubator, accelerator, studio kind of as the same thing, and there are studios out there that have accelerators, and there are studios that have incubators, and there are incubators and accelerators that are together. So it does get kind of confusing sometimes. Um, it kind of just really top line. An incubator is taking a founder who has an idea. Maybe they've got a little MVP. Maybe they've got it's a minimum viable prototype or product, right? They've got something, um, and then in teaching them how to run a business and to go out and get money. And they're not necessarily putting equity into the company. It's more of almost like an instructional class, on how to start a startup, right? Accelerators tend to be a little bit, you might be a little further along, but you're trying to accelerate your growth. Exactly, is what the word says. Those are ones where they will put money into the company, right? But they also then are teaching you skills and helping you do connections and with fundraising and things like that. The studio is a little bit different. Studio, the ideas primarily come from either within the studio. So we come up with the ideas for the companies, or we do a tech transfer with a university, or some other research group that has research and they want to commercialize it. But they're not in the business of commercialization, right? They're in the business of research. So we work with, for example, University of Florida, University of South Florida, their commercialization groups. And we will talk to founders who have an idea, that just kind of they've got an idea, but they just can't even get started. Maybe they've got an idea and they just want to say, "Hey, here's my idea. You guys run with it." You know, but I think it's a great idea, and it's an idea that we didn't have, maybe, right? And it's like, oh, that is a great idea, right? So, we reward those people with equity, into that company if it takes off, whatever. But they may not even they may just be an advisor. Um,
Yeah.
so, the studio is a little bit, like I said, it's a little bit of a different model. We take our own ideas. We also, though, to make sure we don't fall in love with our own ideas a lot, we actually have a board of directors, that investment advisory board of several, people who have multiple exits. They've done well for themselves. They know startups. We actually have to pitch. The studio has to pitch to our board,
Hmm.
and they look at those ideas and say, "Yeah, we like it, except have you thought about this?" Or,
Yeah.
poke holes in our arguments, guys. Right? And there's been times we've had to go get more research and then go back to them again and say, "Yes, okay, you had a good point. We did the research, and now here's the answer." And they're like, "Oh, okay, that is great. We like that idea. Let's move forward." Right? So, it's a nice checks and balances system, between the studio and the board.
Okay, so then you've got the idea. You got the board saying, "Yeah, let's go, Sean. Great idea." What's the next step?
So the next step is, if the board, okays everything, we then form a company. I mean, it's a new, corporation, that's subservient to the studio. We, the studio, fund the company, with a certain amount of dollars. We then, have a founder, and that founder may be an entrepreneur, in the local area who knows the specific space. Sometimes we've already identified a potential founder for an idea even before. We're talking to them before. If we launch this, would you be interested in being the leader of this company? So we find the founders, and the founder then it's their point to take over that company with our guidance, right? So the studio can provide resources like programming and marketing, and a CFO and a COO, and help the company as they grow. But they also have to grow the company, and that includes going out and finding additional funding, right? Matching funding from other investors. So they go out now. The company then grows, matching funds, and the company grows from there, right? Some will grow faster than others, and some will take off, be more successful than others will. Some of them will, inevitably go to zero, unfortunately. We're just hoping that, more of them go to multiple X's than they do go to zero.
Yeah, so it's a little different than, I'm familiar with the founder comes up with the idea, builds it, starts going, gets in over their head, because they're the idea person, and then they bring in the CEO who really knows how to
Right.
run a company.
Yeah.
You're taking it a step before that, and
Yeah.
I think what's kind of interesting to me is that, typically you have the founder who's got this is their baby, right? This is their
Mhm.
idea, and they've got so much passion for it. And like you mentioned before, like with the board, this is helping you. The board helps you from basically
Yeah.
murder your like I say this in copywriting, murder your darlings, right?
Right.
You,
Yes.
yeah, you might have to take something down that they know is not going
Hmm.
to work.
Hmm.
You're bringing in this founder here, and it's not necessarily their darling, but they have a skill set that's very unique to the
Yes.
founders, and
Yes.
and to me, it's kind of intriguing. Like, how do you find these people?
Mhm.
Do you have like you kind of a Rolodex of who who these guys are, and are they
We do.
men, women?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, and founders, the word we use. I mean, you could also use operator. It's somebody like you said that has a skill set that matches this particular startup DNA.
Okay.
Who they want to, and this is a position that is, it's a paid plus equity position. They have a sizable amount of equity, in this company, so they want to see it succeed, right?
Yeah.
Um, How do you find founders? A lot of it is networking, right? Sarasota is uniquely positioned right now, we believe, because of there's kind of a three-legged stool that you need for this to work, right? You need money, right? Sarasota has plenty of that. Sarasota has per capita the most retired Fortune 500 executives of any city in the United States.
Wow.
They are, living out on the Key and Longboat, and
Yeah.
in Anna Maria, um, and they are, they're retired, quote unquote, but they're not dead. They want to still do things, right? And they
Yeah.
can only play so much golf, so much pickleball, and stuff like this. So they want to be involved, but they don't want a 40-hour week job, right?
Yeah.
They want to be involved. Maybe they just want to, invest, but maybe they also want to invest and also advise, right?
Sure.
So you've got that one aspect. The other aspect is tech talent. Sarasota has a large amount of tech talent, and it just keeps growing, growing, growing. We actually just yesterday had there's a nonprofit group called Sarasota Tech, just had their second annual summit. Just after 2 years, brought in 500 people. All day speaking engagement. I and a couple other people spoke at it as well, and just the amount of tech talent out there was just amazing. During
Wow.
COVID, we had a lot of people leave California and New York and come down to Florida, and they decided just to stay, after COVID. So and then the third is you need entrepreneurial spirit. You need these founders, right? And through knowing the tech people and the capital, liquidity providers and all these retired executives, we have this great network in Sarasota of people who are builders, right? Who have formed startups, who have started companies, have exited companies. A lot of them, the joke at the Bridge Angel Investor Group is always like, after my third retirement, So people are always introducing themselves that way. So, I think if you're a builder, you never stop building.
Right.
Nobody's just going to sit there and go like, oh yeah, I retired at 55 or 60, and I'm not doing anything else.
Yeah.
These are people who are just going to be building until they pull them out feet first.
Right. Well, let's get into more specifics on the type of companies you're building. You use AI, like you mentioned to me earlier, that AI is basically the foundation or part of all these ventures.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what type of companies you guys are building.
Mhm. AI can be used, incorrectly and overly hyped, of course, right? But I think at this point, any software based company, or any even service based company, if you're not using some facet of AI right now, even the fundamentals, whether it's just to rewrite language or rewrite contracts or to automate things back and forth between two pieces of software, if you're not doing something in that, you're probably missing out, right? So
Right.
our thesis is that there's going to be an AI backbone, to kind of everything. And then kind of the three areas that we're looking at is just general, manufacturing related, primarily software. We're not looking at any kind of hardware, but being able to help manufacturers, plan or be able to, you know, sorry, just lost my train of thought there. Be able to plan or be able to optimize their operations, right? The second is fintech, which includes insurance and banking and tokenization and things like that. And the third is healthcare, and primarily healthcare services and healthcare software, both B2B and B2C. These be kind of the areas that a lot of us have experience in, and is in the DNA of Sarasota. Those are kind of the three areas that are pretty big. Um, so that's the type of companies that we are currently incubating, not incubating, but growing in the studio. And we're close to launching a couple of them. Well, this year for sure we'll be launching at least 3 or 4.
Can you give us some real world examples? Tell us some of the companies you guys are working on, or is it still too early?
Yeah, it's still a little too early,
Okay.
unfortunately. Yeah, keep
Okay.
tuned. Stay tuned. There'll be you'll see some names coming out, but yeah, unfortunately, yeah, can't. It's too early in the process to give away the
No
names.
worries. No worries. I was hoping for the scoop here, but
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit just in terms of the AI. I had someone on the show, and we were talking about the difference between generative and autonomous.
Mm.
Is there what is there? Are you focused more on the autonomous or the generative, or is it kind of a mix of both?
I'd say more generative. Using the AI tools to make your job easier, right? And part of that is using the AI to build the software that you're building.
Yeah,
Some people say vibe coding and things like that, and it's not exactly what we're doing, but we are using AI tools to even help us look at, we have an idea, we're we have a problem and a solution, right? Or a proposed problem and solution. We've written some AI that allows us to insert the problem, insert the solution, and then it goes and does deep research on it for us. So
right.
goes away, 20 minutes later, comes back, and it has looked at things like, what is the market size? What's the TAM, SAM, and SOM? What's the moats that we have in our idea versus what other people, who are your competitors out there? And it collects all this information and gives us back this, 5 to 10 page document that we could then all kind of digest and look at and go, yeah, this is right, or like, wait, no, the AI made a wrong assumption.
Yeah,
We can go back in and say, hey, no, you made the wrong assumption here. This is actually the true case. And then it does the research again, right? So now this allows us collectively to all be able to look at one idea and then basically kind of rate it, right? What do we think on these different metrics? Where does it fall from 1 to 10, right? That's kind of how we get all of our ideas to float to the top, right? And some of them very quickly. I mean, we get these ideas. Sometimes they don't even hit the AI stage, right? We look at these ideas and go like, nah, that's not going to work, right?
yeah,
Other times we're like, huh, this is interesting. Like,
yeah.
I don't know if there's somebody. We find competitors all the time that we never even thought about, right? There are some ideas we had one of ours that was a purely B2C play. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was purely a B2C play, but business to customer play that we then figured out that no, the market for this is actually B2B.
Mm,
We were completely wrong once we started doing all this research,
yeah.
and which was great because it was a much larger market, right?
Okay.
So we were afraid that like, oh, the businesses will never buy the software. And we found out like actually the customers will never buy the software. It's the businesses they're going to buy us. So using, you've heard the phrase, eat your own dog food. We try to use those tools internally to help us generate the companies that we're doing.
I've used AI, and I'm using just Chat GPT, and on the ideation, I think it's fantastic. I
Mhm.
mean, it is amazing. I'll come up with an idea and then have a conversation. And of course, naturally, AI is like, this is such a great idea.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
I love it. It's such a, it
yep.
just,
It's overly positive,
it's,
yes, and optimistic. So we've had to. This is where I think a lot of people miss the boat on, especially large language models. They the hallucinations and the things like that come typically from bad prompting.
yeah,
Somebody just wants to type in one sentence
yeah,
and they want it to give you all this wealth of information. Well, you really have to craft a prompt. And sometimes, I mean, I've even used one language model to write my prompt to put into another language model. It's like, help
sure.
me write a prompt that is going to discuss this stuff and ask these questions and all. And
Yeah,
um, so the other thing is, just depending on which language model you're using, a lot of them have a master prompt, right? So you could put in some basic, like, for example, never use M dashes, right? That's Chat GPT, right? Which has gotten better at it. But, in my master prompt was never use M dashes and, be precise, but not, too vague. And you can do things within GPTs, like our one that we looked at our analysis, and like we said, you are playing the role of a research analysis, who's looking at investing in these companies and all. We do not want you to be overly optimistic. We want you to be critical when
hmm,
when it makes sense. And when you do that, you get completely different answers
yeah,
out of the software. You
sure.
actually get better answers, and there's less hallucinations. Now, it still can make mistakes, right? It
Yeah.
still has its problems, but it's if you spend the time to ask the question, it's still garbage in, garbage out, right? If you just give it one sentence, you're not going to get that great back out of it.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was feeding it some data, and I was giving it actual data, and I was like, it's just going to help me analyze this. And it gave me these things that their analysis, and I was like, oh, this is great. It's looking right off the data. And then I said, well, wait a second, how did you get that? Did you infer that, or are you reacting to the data? And it's like, well,
Mhm.
there's some inferences made. So, you know, because it's a big autofill is what it
Yeah,
is. So if it
yeah.
doesn't have your answer, it's gonna do whatever else is out there.
Exactly. And when you're looking for, specific numbers and like you want to know, you've got to make sure that it's giving you citations, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of them are getting better about that. It's like, I got this information from the here, right? Um, you know, where when it's having to make, you know, analytical inferences, like you're saying, you have to double check the numbers, right?
Yeah.
I was always taught in engineering, um, you kind of need to know the answer before you even solve the problem. So you should know, just looking at this, like you're doing some calculation for forces or speeds or something like that. And you're like, it should probably be about 100 pounds ish. And so you do the calculations and it comes out at, 89 pounds or 110 pounds, like, oh, okay, yeah, this is probably correct. If your calculations come out at 2 pounds, you're like, so
Yeah.
was my idea wrong, or is the formula wrong, right? I think it's the same way with AI. You almost have to need to know the answer sort of already,
Yeah.
and then it reinforces that yes, this is correct, and it refines your answer. So I'm guessing 100 pounds, but it's telling me no, it's 105 pounds exactly, right?
That
Okay, then I'll believe that because my guess was pretty good.
that's exactly how I cracked it and caught it because I
Yeah,
knew what the actual data,
right,
the answer
right.
was. That's really
Yeah.
good point. Talk to me a little bit about your customer development. And I like that you spitball to your shark tank with your ideas, and then you're kind of okay, you got that blessing. And my own personal product development here at Windbound, we did something, and boy, we found a ton of people who said it was a great idea. And then but it's still, you got to go out
Mhm.
and you got to
Yep.
sell the idea and see if it works. So after you get the blessing from your board of directors,
Mhm.
what is the next step? Where is the real
Mhm.
customer development occur where you're like, well, let me just see if I can sell the damn thing for
Sure, sure, right, yeah. And some of that takes place before we even get the blessing from the board. Depending on the venture, we might build a little MVP or a painted door test or something like that, and just put it out there, and just to get the reaction of people, just to put it out there, buy some Google ads, buy some Facebook's Instagram ads, whatever, drive some
Right.
traffic to the site, have them go through and see how many people click through all the way to the it's like, hey, do you want to buy this? Yes. It's like, well, it's coming soon, right?
Yeah.
We showed that there were people who were interested, who were willing to give us their credit card number. Shows interest, right? We could do analytics on all that. So there's some testing, go to market testing that takes place before that. However, certainly after we get the okay, you got to keep doing that, right? And a lot of times, our belief is get a product out and then iterate on that and get feedback from the customers, right? Let them do a freemium version, for example. Let them use it for free and see where they click and what they like and what they don't like about it and all, and then iterate, because what you thought the product is going to look like is probably not what it's going to end up at the very end. So don't sit there and put too much time and energy into making it perfect the first time, because it won't be. Get a product out there, and I think that's just I think part of it. I don't want to be to blame it or give credit to AI in this, but it's because of AI. It's a lot of these cycles are getting much faster. Instead of months, it's becoming weeks. Instead of weeks,
Mm.
it's becoming days. Instead of days, it's becoming hours. Right? We're able to speed up a lot of this iteration a lot faster.
I like your use of the digital media too, to kind of test it, and some of those cheap Facebook
Mhm.
ads and
Mhm.
Google demand gen and things like that. Um, I think one thing I want to come back to is the whole idea of the studio. And I remember Warren Buffett saying he wouldn't invest in anything unless he's an expert in it. Which,
Mhm.
I mean, if you look at his portfolio, that's probably not entirely true. It's just how big it is. But somebody in there is an expert. And
Yeah.
I think what's kind of intriguing to me about what you're doing is your background. You are an expert in automation and a lot of these things.
Mhm.
And do you think that really separates you from other VCs and kind of gives you a little bit of an edge in terms of when you're going out and looking for investors?
Yeah, I do, and I consider myself, it's not just automation, it's manufacturing in general.
Yeah.
I've, because even my automation company was a manufacturer, right?
Right.
So at heart, I'm a manufacturer. Um, I think it does because the principals at the studio are experts in those fields, fintech and healthcare and
Okay.
AI and things like that. So I do believe it gives you a lot of credence. We also have surrounded ourselves with a great group of advisors that, quite honestly, you name the subject, and we're probably one degree at most away from somebody who's an expert in that particular subject. So the network effects are really great. So if we get an idea in here or a problem, and it has something to do with, you know, I'm just going to make something up, but it has to do with blockchain and DNA sequencing or something like that. We can probably go find a blockchain expert and a DNA sequencing expert pretty easily in our network, and then bring them in and say, "Hey guys, what do you think about this? Do we have an idea here? Is this something that you'd be interested in? Or are we just barking up the wrong tree?"
Right. I want to just take a real big picture view of just AI now because we've been talking about it so much. But I mean, you're working in it. You're it's a tool you're using every day, and I think there's a lot of people who maybe not using AI, and I feel like as a whole, kind of collectively, we're starting to see the use of AI take place or get sharpened a little bit and
Mhm.
how we can use it and what its role is. Do you feel that's coming into focus a little bit more? Or, are we still like even a couple years ago where people are like, it's going to do everything. And, and I know,
It depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking to
yeah,
Nvidia, it's
yeah,
going to do everything, right? They want to keep selling GPUs. If you talk to Anthropic or OpenAI, it's going to do everything. And I think we got to ground ourselves in reality that it's everybody has just determined. We were talking about the hallucinations and the
yeah,
incorrect answers and things like that. There are limitations on it. It's a tool. It is a tool that can speed up your processes. It can make your optimize a lot of your processes and things like that. Um, I mean, I think we haven't even scratched the surface on some stuff. I'm sure everybody has had this exact same thing where you've got a bunch of Excel data and you got to do the same thing to every cell, right? So you can be like, all right, do I write a Mac? Do I spend 10 minutes to write a macro to do it? Or, do I just go through and just go, get that rhythm, backspace, backspace, enter, backspace, backspace, enter, and I can just kind of get through it kind of quickly, right? Why don't we have tools now where if I do an option, something backspace, backspace, enter more than about two or three times, it should just go like, oh, I see what you're doing,
yeah,
boom, and just finishes it. Now, yes, you can use Copilot or something like that and say, hey, go into these cells and remove all this sort of stuff. But I'm telling it what to do. It should kind of be inferring what I'm
hmm,
trying to do. It sees that I'm doing these actions. And I think, to an extent, it's doing that like on emails now. Like in Gemini, you can start typing and all of a sudden it completes your thought.
oh yeah,
And a lot of times it's like, yeah, that's pretty much what I was going to type. Tap, boom, right? Um, you know, those are those really just fundamental things that if you take away a second from every task you have to do all day long, it adds up to minutes and hours over your
yeah.
day. That adds up to years over your lifetime. Um, so I think we need to maybe kind of focus on some of the fundamentals a little bit more than it's great that it can create videos off of prompt, right? But I think we all agree that most of that is just kind of AI slop, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, we can kind of research that stuff, but let's try to like make our lives easier and better and more optimized, you know, versus, you know, creating a, you know, a video of a Bigfoot or, you know, running down the street.
Yeah. Well, as a content creator, I appreciate that thought. So, um, Sean, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining us. And if someone wants to get a hold of you and learn more about Suncoast and how they maybe they're a founder and they'd like to get added to that Rolodex, how do they do that?
Sure. Yeah. The best way probably just, you know, find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm one of the few Sean Dotsons out there. Or you can always visit Studio. And there's links to contact myself and my other partners.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for joining us. Hold on for just a second after we end the show, but thanks to everybody else for joining us on Thought Leaders Live.
Thanks.